Liquor and its friends. While a cynical press, disgusted at the political acts of Mr. William J. Bryan, applaud in servile glee each motion of his successor, Robert Lansing, Prime Minister of the United States, and presumably a man desirous of bettering our country, has just restored the disgusting presence of liquor at American state dinners, as though to aggravate the offense. Mr. Lansing has given out the statement, "Mr. Lansing and I are not extremists in the advocacy of temperance. William Jennings Bryan was a bungler in politics and a stranger to dignity, a simple creature who sought to apply impossible theories to the government of a great nation, very obviously the intellectual inferior of Robert Lansing, but he was an honest man bent on the victory of what he deemed right and bowing before no vicious custom, however long established in good society. Bryan, with the same will that made our administration ridiculous in its foreign policy, made it glorious in its freedom from vicious intemperance. His abolition of wine from the tables of state was the first toward giving the American people a high governmental example of decency. What all decent men had preached for nearly a century, he and he alone established where all might view it in exalted practice. His was the only true logic. The government attempts to keep the people to the law. Liquor attempts to stir the people against the law. Therefore, the purposes of government and liquor are forever opposed. No government can afford to demand virtue while all its members conspicuously violate it. But our thoughtless masses and unprincipled newspapers fail to grasp the significance of the act. The superficial, satirical phrase, grape juice diplomacy, is a tremendously forceful epitome of the brainless estimate of which confounded Mr. Bryan's sound ideas on temperance with his unsound ideas on peace and politics. Thus, with the spectacular departure of the ex-secretary from Washington, there was also a departure of his virtuous principles, and Robert Lansing is not an extremist in the advocacy of temperance. In repeating the assertion that Mr. Bryan is intellectually inferior to Mr. Lansing, the conservative must therefore add a further comparison and state with equal emphasis that as a man and a moralist, the grape juice diplomatist presents a figure which dwarfs in pettiness his wine-bibbing, time-serving, vine-sanctioning successor. Robert Lansing is a gentleman and a real statesman, but so far as a moral example is concerned, he stands on a level with the distiller and the brewer and the bartender. If the United States government really desires order and virtue among its inhabitants, it will promptly require that the most noxious evil of human life be not publicly sanctioned and flaunted in the very shadow of the Capitol's dome, or within the White House itself. True reformation, contrary to the general idea, begins at the top and works downward as if through gravity. Not long ago, one of Mr. Lansing's fellow drinkers and possible admirers, E.J. Gray by name and beer salesman by profession, also contributed his mite toward the cause of vice and moral delinquency. At Onset, Massachusetts, during a temperance speech delivered by ex-Governor Foss, Mr. Gray interrupted the speaker in one of his anti-liquor arguments by raising and bawling, "You're a liar." After this, the red-faced liquor advocate proudly volunteered the information that he had drunk whiskey and seltzer for 25 years, to which Governor Foss very justly and aptly retorted, "You look it." While the vulgar Gray incident may outwardly seem quite different from the conservative decision of Secretary and Miss Robert Lansing to serve wine at all their diplomatic banquets, the same bestial daemon lurks equally beneath both. In each there is a conscious disregard for natural law and moral rectitude, and hideous disregard which will eventually wreck civilization. And Eugene Noble Foss of 1858 to 1939 was the Democrat governor of Massachusetts, 1911 to 1913. And William James Bryan, 1860 to 1925, was appointed by President Woodrow Wilson as Secretary of State, and he resigned June 9th, 1915. And Lansing replaced him and served until the 12th of February, 1920. And an extremist is not the same thing as, well, I won't participate in what others do in this regard, right? That's not the same thing. Or an extremist isn't somebody who keeps to the principles. That's just not being a fanatic. One of the definitions of a fanatic is somebody who, like, they claim a path, but they just, they claim the path. They worship the leader or, that sort of stuff. And then they go off and, don't keep to the principles. So in a way, those who are saying, they provide what they might claim to be a sin for others or that sort of thing, they're the true fanatics. And some countries, they don't have spine. So if you can keep your drinking and stuff to yourself, the state doesn't get involved. I think that's sort of the middle ground that needs to be formed. I've talked about that idea of a religious state on my channel, is the one that doesn't get involved with that, and one that allows the sorcery of other faith groups. You know what I mean? The ritual drug use, that type of sorcery. But we look at whether it's legal or illegal, the majority of serious crime or serious mental illness is linked to alcohol use. Most of the rest is linked to other drug use. Health problems too, alcohol and tobacco and all that sort of stuff. The average user, even if they quit, they've done stuff to shorten their lives. Well, I mean, their life is shorter, but ends up being shorter because of factors that include that.